Winter Sleep, a Hibernation Story by Sean Taylor and Alex Morris. When it was summer, I stayed at Granny Sylvie's house. She knows lots of things, like the names of flowers and how to spot a deer's hoofprint, and where to splash around the pond, climb a slope of green ferns, pass through oak trees with moss on one side, and find the secret glade. Butterflies fluttered, even though it was late. Granny Sylvie helped me listen for songs of different birds. It was still warm. We stayed right into the summer magic of the night, and we kept so still we saw the dormouse who lives there run up a hazel tree. When I went back to stay with Granny, it was winter. I asked her, "Can we go to the secret glade?" She said yes, if you can find it. Everything was different. The pond was frozen hard. The ferns on the slope looked dead. The oak trees with moss on one side were all bony. And the glade was quiet and bare. It wasn't anything the same. No butterflies, no flowers, no birds. I wanted to see the dormouse, but Granny said the dormouse will be having a winter sleep. It was too cold to stay, and I said, "Nothing's alive in winter." Granny Sylvie told me, "It is." We can't see the dormouse, but she's hiding here. She'll be safely, deeply sleeping all winter long. This is her hibernation time. In autumn, she feasted on forest nuts, fruits, and insects. Then the long nights came. She felt cold, heavy, and sleepy. There was nothing more to eat, so she made a nest ball, and she's inside, secretly snoring until the spring sun warms her body again. On the way back, I asked, "Are there other animals hiding in the trees?" Granny said yes, lots of bats hibernate in trees. On warm nights, they fly across the forest, chasing insects and pulling spiders from webs. But even their food rests in winter, so bats snuggle up in a hollow trunk or cave and snooze through the frosty weather. I said, "Where do all the insects go?" Granny told me, "Some are sleeping right under your feet. The ground is frozen hard, but down below there are stag beetles waiting to come out. The queen bumblebee sleeps in a tiny tunnel. Some moths and butterflies hide underground, often wrapped up waiting for spring. Mother earwigs look after their eggs until they hatch when spring comes." We were coming to the pond, so I asked, "What about in the water?" Granny said, "There's ice on top, but pond life waits below." Before it froze, frogs dived down deep into slimy mud. Now they are still and breathing so slowly they seem dead. But when the water warms in the spring, we'll hear them croaking again. I said, "So all sorts of animals are having a winter sleep." "That's right," Granny Sylvie told me. "Some even make a special home for winter. A bear builds a den deep in the woods, perhaps in a cave, an old tree trunk, or hidden hollow. Mommy bear slows right down and rests there with her cubs, curled up tight on a bed she's made from soft moss, twigs, and leaves." Granny Sylvie was still telling me about the animals in winter when I was in bed. "You see," she told me, "there's plenty of life tucked up, hiding in the cold." I nodded. I could feel the cozy magic of the dark night outside, and even though it wasn't very late, I closed my eyes for a winter sleep. What is hibernation? Can you imagine going to bed in winter and not getting up until spring? When a snowy blanket arrives, much of the world seems sleepy. The sun feels lazy, the nights are long, trees look undressed, ponds freeze over, fewer birds sing, even the flowers are resting. With plants shutting down for the colder, darker winter months, there are few flowers, fruits, nuts, and leaves for animals to feed on. There are also fewer insects to eat. It is difficult for many creatures to find food and keep warm. Instead, they snuggle up somewhere secret, sheltered, and safe. Hibernation is a special kind of deep sleep. It helps animals live through the coldest and hungriest times by saving them energy. They find or make a place to hide out of danger from hungry predators. Mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and many beasts have different kinds of winter sleep. Mammals. In the winter, mammals need lots of food to keep warm and active, but where it is coldest, some hibernate instead. In autumn, they eat a lot to fatten up. Their fat protects them against the cold and gives them energy when there is no food. They become sleepier as their body cools down. Woodchuck. When it is hibernating, the woodchuck or groundhog might only take one breath every 5 minutes. Arctic ground squirrel. The Arctic ground squirrel has the coldest winter body of any hibernating mammal. It gets so cold, its brain almost freezes, and its heart only beats once per minute. Polar bear. A pregnant polar bear digs out a den in the snow. She shelters inside and hardly eats for months. When her cubs are born, they will doze, snuggled up in her warm fur. Bat. In chilly places, bats spend most of the winter hanging upside down, snoozing in their roost. They store up warm fat on their backs and bellies to give them energy. Deer mouse. Deer mice cuddle up to stay warm on cold days. They also survive by making different blood, which provides more energy in winter. They hide stores of snacks away from others in old, unused birds' nests. Hedgehog. A hedgehog builds a nest of leaves in winter. This is often under a shed, in an old rabbit burrow, or under a compost heap. As it sleeps rolled into a tight ball, its body temperature drops from about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius, to about 41 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius. European hamster. The wild European hamster may spend half the year hiding away deep in the earth. In her maze of underground tunnels, she is safe from most predators and sheltered from winter weather. Reptiles, amphibians, fish, and birds. Reptiles and amphibians are cold-blooded, so they can't control their temperature. The sun warms them up, so when it's cold, they bury themselves away to hibernate. Very few birds hibernate, but some species go into short rest called torpor. Terrapin. Europe's wild terrapin spends winter down at the soft, muddy bottom of a pond, lake, or slow river, but it also takes a long, lazy rest in summer if it gets too hot. Tortoise. Some tortoises survive the cold by burying themselves in soft soil for about 3 months. Gila monster. The Gila monster rests through winter, and her eggs do too. She lays them in July or August, but the hatchlings don't emerge until the spring. Leopard gecko. On sunny days, geckos lay soaking up as much sunlight as they can. Then at night, they use the energy to run around feeding. But even their desert home can get cold. When the temperature drops below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees Celsius, geckos rest underground. Grass snake. A grass snake finds a sheltered refuge underground or in a deep pile of leaves or compost. Its winter resting place is called a hibernaculum. Sand lizard. The sand lizard likes sand dunes, rocks, and sandy heathland. In winter, it dives down into a burrow and sometimes shares its home with other sand lizards. Wood frog. In winter, wood frogs wiggle into a pile of leaves or under a log. Their heart stops, their breathing stops, and they freeze almost solid. Fish. Some fish become much less active in winter. Their bodies slow down and they eat less. Porwheel. Unusually for a bird, the porwheel hibernates. It retreats under rocks or logs for about 100 days. Mini beasts. Mini beasts have a winter sleep called diapause. Many insects, spiders, slugs, and other tiny creatures live for less than one whole year, but they find ways to make their young get through the cold. Their babies may spend time as an egg, as a sleepy larva safely inside a cocoon, or resting. Diapause can happen for other reasons too, such as during very hot or dry times. The tobacco hornworm. The tobacco hornworm grows into a hawk moth. Sunlight works like a clock for this little creature, so when the days get shorter, it wiggles down into the ground and rests. Arctic woolly bear. The Arctic woolly bear lives in the chilliest place on Earth. Every year it wakes up for just 1 month. It sleeps for all the rest of its 15-year-long life. Everest jumping spider. The Everest jumping spider lives in probably the highest animal home in the world, 22,000 feet, 6,700 meters, up on Mount Everest. To survive the coldest times, it needs a special liquid in its body to stop it from freezing. Short-horned grasshopper. The short-horned grasshopper lays 100 tiny eggs in a burrow. She covers them in a sticky foam. This dries into a pod that protects the eggs through the winter. Knotgrass moth. The knotgrass moth gets through winter in a cocoon disguised with leaves, grass, and twigs. Gall wasp. Oak trees often have strange wooden galls on their branches. Inside each one is the larva of a little wasp. The mother lays an egg that makes the tree grow a small house around her baby, giving it food and a safe home for winter. Wood ant. Wood ants make a giant city on the forest floor, with hidden chambers underground. In winter, they get sluggish and close the door to keep out the whooshing wind. Ladybug. Adult ladybugs find shelter from the cold behind bark, under leaves, or in a dry building, often in groups. Caddisfly. The caddisfly larva builds a tube made of silk with twigs and grit. It hides itself in all winter long at the bottom of a pond or stream. Earthworm. For the winter, some earthworms burrow down and curl up in an oval-shaped chamber deep in the dirt.